A grainy black and white film changed everything we thought we knew. In 1995, a video surfaced claiming to show an actual autopsy of an otherworldly being, and it ignited a global firestorm that still burns today. This is the story of the Alien Autopsy footage, a mystery that has divided scientists, fooled millions, and become a permanent fixture of our modern myths. By the end, you will understand the intricate web of evidence, deception, and human desire that makes this case impossible to forget. We will uncover who really created the bizarre creature on the slab and why so many people wanted to believe it was real. What does this decades-old hoax reveal about our deepest hopes and fears? The footage exploded into public consciousness with a carefully orchestrated premiere. In August of 1995, the Fox television network in the United States aired a one-hour special titled Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction. It was not presented as a hard-hitting documentary, but as a tantalizing puzzle box. The host, veteran journalist and former United States Marine Commandant Robert Dean, guided viewers through the grainy, unsettling film, posing questions rather than providing answers. The production company behind it, a British outfit called Merlin Productions, had acquired the film from a man named Ray Santilli, a music promoter turned film archivist with a story just as strange as the footage itself. Santilli claimed he had purchased the reels from a retired military cameraman who had been present in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. The special was a ratings juggernaut, shattering expectations and becoming one of the highest-rated programs in Fox's history at that time. The public reaction was instant and volcanic. Lines were drawn in living rooms and workplaces across the country. Some watched in horrified belief, convinced they were witnessing forbidden history. Others scoffed, pointing out the bizarre, almost cartoonish anatomy of the creature. The debate was exactly what the producers had banked on. Months later, the frenzy crossed the Atlantic when Britain's Channel 4 aired its own version, hosted by renowned journalist and skeptic Michael Parkinson. The UK audience was equally captivated and divided. This was not a quiet leak or a niche conspiracy theory. This was a full-blown media event, a global conversation starter packaged as entertainment. The central question was no longer just about aliens, it was about the film itself. Could something that looked so crude, so strangely staged, possibly be real? And if it was a fake, who had the skill or the audacity to pull off such an elaborate deception on such a massive scale? The spotlight now turned directly to the man who started it all. The film opens with a jittery, silent view of a stockroom that feels more like a temporary operating theater than a proper hospital. The walls are plain, the lighting harsh and unflattering, casting deep shadows across a metal autopsy table. Two figures move with deliberate, almost clumsy purpose, clad in what appear to be old-fashioned protective suits, the kind you might see in a 1950s science fiction movie, complete with large, round viewing ports in their hoods. Their identities are completely obscured, adding to the chilling sense of secrecy. On the table lies the reason for all this clandestine activity, a creature that defies simple explanation. The body is small, perhaps 4 feet long, with an oversized, bulbous head that seems too heavy for its slender neck. Its eyes are large, dark, and almond-shaped, staring blankly at the ceiling. The most striking features are its hands, each one ending in 6 long, delicate fingers. The torso appears strangely smooth, but there is a visible, jagged tear along one side, a wound that looks less like a cut and more like a violent rupture from within. The atmosphere is grim and clinical, punctuated only by the sound of surgical instruments clinking against a metal tray. The men never speak, their communication reduced to silent gestures and nods, which somehow makes the procedure feel even more cold and detached from any sense of medical compassion. One of the examiners begins by probing the head wound with a long instrument before taking a scalpel and making a Y-shaped incision across the scalp. The skin is peeled back to reveal a black, shiny skull that yields easily to a small saw. As the top of the cranium is lifted away, the camera offers a glimpse of a gray, gelatinous mass that is supposedly the brain. In another unsettling sequence, one of the men uses a tool to carefully extract the eye, a dark, marble-like orb that comes free with a faint, wet sound. Throughout the procedure, a mysterious, inky-black liquid occasionally oozes from the body's cavities, pooling on the table. Every action feels methodical yet strangely amateurish, a performance of scientific rigor without any of the expected precision of a true forensic examination. This was the visual evidence presented to the world, a collection of bizarre details that invited scrutiny even as it demanded belief. Into this storm of controversy stepped the man who supplied the film, Ray Santilli. He was not a scientist or a government insider, but a London-based entrepreneur who dealt in music memorabilia and archival footage. His story was as peculiar as the autopsy itself. Santilli claimed that in 1992 he was in Cleveland, Ohio, on a routine business trip searching for old film reels of Elvis Presley. Through a network of contacts, he was introduced to a retired military cameraman, a man who wished to remain anonymous. This cameraman, according to Santilli, had been present at Roswell in 1947 and had filmed multiple events, including the recovery of a crashed vehicle and the subsequent autopsy of its occupant. Santilli said he purchased 22 reels of film from the man, of which the autopsy footage was just a small part. In early interviews, Santilli presented a confident, almost casual demeanor. He stuck to his narrative with the smoothness of a salesman, but when pressed for concrete details, the name of the cameraman, the exact location of the meeting, the chain of custody for the film, he became evasive, citing promises of confidentiality and the cameraman's fear of reprisal. This created the first major fracture in the story's credibility. Was Ray Santilli a masterful hoaxer, orchestrating one of the most elaborate media deceptions in history? Or was he merely a naive middleman, a businessman who stumbled upon something genuine but lacked the evidence to prove it? Perhaps he was a genuine conduit, the one person brave or lucky enough to bring a world-shattering secret to light. The answer would determine whether the Alien Autopsy was a historic revelation or an historic fraud, and the hunt for that truth was just beginning. The heart of Santilli's story always rested with the mysterious cameraman. For years, this source was a ghost, referred to only as a retired military photographer too frightened to come forward. Then a name finally emerged from the shadows: Jack Barnett. According to Santilli, Barnett was the man he met in Cleveland, the one who had sold him the reels. His backstory was a perfect fit for the Roswell legend. He was supposedly a highly skilled cameraman attached to a United States Army Air Force's film unit in 1947, deployed to document sensitive material. The story went that he was ordered to film the wreckage recovery in the New Mexico desert, and then, in a secure facility, the autopsy of the recovered beings. Defying orders to destroy the footage, Barnett secretly kept the original film cans, hiding them away for nearly 5 decades before finally deciding to sell. On the surface, it was a compelling narrative, the tale of a brave whistleblower preserving history. But when investigators and journalists began pulling at the threads, the entire story began to unravel. The first major issue was the complete lack of a verifiable military record for anyone named Jack Barnett who fit this specific profile. No service number, no unit assignment, no pension records, nothing that could place him in Roswell at that time. The military maintains extensive archives, and the absence of any trace was a glaring red flag. Then came the question of access, the idea that a single cameraman, even a military one, would have been granted such unrestricted, solo access to both a classified crash site and a top-secret autopsy stretches credibility. Such an event would have been swarming with high-ranking officers, scientists, and multiple security personnel. The footage shows only two examiners and the cameraman himself, with no sign of the intense security one would expect around the century's biggest secret. Most damaging of all were the shifting details in Santilli's own account. The location of the meeting with Barnett changed. The number of film reels purchased was adjusted. Even descriptions of the cameraman's demeanor and health seemed to vary from interview to interview. A story based on a real person and real events should have a solid core, but the tale of Jack Barnett felt more like a narrative convenience, a character crafted to explain the inexplicable origin of a very strange film. If the foundation was this shaky, what did that say about the footage it was meant to support? Beyond the shaky story of its origin, the film itself had to withstand the scrutiny of science. What would a trained eye see when it looked past the mystery and focused purely on the biology of the creature on the slab? The first thing any anatomist would notice is the profound imbalance of its form. The head is enormous, a classic gray alien dome that seems to house a brain case far larger proportionally than a human's. This immediately raises a question of basic physics. Such a heavy head on such a slender, fragile-looking neck would create immense strain. For a being that supposedly evolved for mobility, this design is a significant engineering flaw, requiring extremely strong neck muscles and vertebrae that we simply do not see. The creature's limbs are another puzzle. They are spindly, with no clear definition of major muscle groups. The arms are long, but the legs are shorter and oddly jointed. If this being walked upright, its center of gravity would be highly unstable, especially with that top-heavy skull. Then there are the hands, perhaps the most iconic detail. 6 long, thin fingers on each hand. In earthly biology, pentadactyly, the pattern of 5 digits, is a deeply conserved trait seen in everything from frogs to humans, a legacy of our common evolutionary ancestry. A random mutation for an extra digit is one thing, but a fully formed, symmetrical 6-fingered hand on an entirely different evolutionary tree is a remarkable and unexplained coincidence. It feels less like a product of alien natural selection and more like a creative choice, an attempt to make the being seem just one step removed from human. When we peer inside, the biological contradictions multiply. The autopsy shows the examiners removing what appears to be a brain, a gray, undifferentiated mass. But a creature with a skull that large would presumably have a highly complex brain with distinct lobes and folds, not a featureless blob. More telling is what we do not see. There is no clear evidence of a respiratory system, no lungs being extracted. No digestive tract is shown, no heart or major circulatory organs. The body cavity, once opened, seems to contain mostly that mysterious black fluid and a few unidentifiable lumps. From an evolutionary standpoint, this makes no sense. Any complex, mobile organism needs systems for energy intake, oxygen processing, and nutrient distribution. The creature on the table, for all its strange exterior, lacks the internal architecture of a living, functioning animal. It has the silhouette of an alien, but the hollow anatomy of a prop. The medical procedures themselves offer the most damning evidence against the film's authenticity. When viewed not as a shocking revelation but as a piece of filmmaking, the autopsy sequence is riddled with errors that no trained professional would make. The 2 figures in the protective suits move with an unsettling clumsiness. Their handling of the instruments lacks the practiced, economical grace of a surgeon or pathologist. The initial incision, the Y-shaped cut across the scalp and down the torso, is performed with a startling lack of regard for underlying structures. In a real autopsy, every cut is deliberate, meant to expose organs for careful study while preserving their connections. Here, the cutting seems haphazard, more focused on opening the body than systematically exploring it. Once the body cavity is exposed, the deviations from standard protocol become impossible to ignore. In any forensic examination, especially one of an unknown specimen, documentation is paramount. Every organ is meticulously removed, weighed, measured, photographed, and described. Samples are taken for microscopic and chemical analysis. None of this happens. The examiners simply reach into the cavity and pull out unidentifiable lumps of tissue, placing them casually into a metal bowl. There is no scale in sight, no assistant logging findings, no close-up photography of the organs in situ. The brain, a potential treasure trove of information about the creature's neurology, is sawed out and set aside with no more ceremony than one would give a melon. The tools they use are another red flag. While some appear to be standard surgical instruments, others look oddly primitive, like common kitchen tools or props from an old laboratory. A genuine, high-stakes military autopsy on an unknown biological entity would be conducted with the finest available equipment in a sterile, controlled environment by a team of the nation's top experts in pathology, xenobiology, and forensic science. The atmosphere would be one of intense, silent concentration, not the almost casual, bumbling activity we see. The examiners in the film occasionally pause and look directly at the camera, a breach of professional conduct so severe it feels like a staged performance. Contrast this with how such a historic event would realistically unfold. The room would be flooded with light for perfect visibility. Multiple cameras would record from different angles. Each step would be narrated aloud for the record. Specialists would be on hand to take immediate tissue and fluid samples. The focus would be on gathering as much data as possible, not on quickly dissecting a body for a single, shaky camera. The film's procedure is not a scientific examination. It is a pantomime of one, designed to look clinical to an untrained eye, but revealing its theatrical nature to anyone who knows what a real autopsy entails. This glaring disconnect between what we are told we are seeing and what we are actually shown forms the core of the hoax. If the science is a sham, what does that say about the creature lying on the table? The creature's impossible biology was one thing, but the physical materials used to create the film presented a more concrete puzzle. Forensic analysis of the film stock itself became a critical battleground. When experts first examined the grainy black and white footage, they made a startling preliminary finding. The celluloid appeared to be authentic stock from the 1940s. This single detail gave the film an immense boost of early credibility. How could a fake be filmed on genuinely old materials? The answer lies in a simple but often overlooked fact of the film industry. Vast quantities of unused, blank motion picture film stock from that era still exist in warehouses, private collections, and forgotten studio vaults. It is entirely possible, even straightforward, for a determined filmmaker to acquire reels of this vintage celluloid, load it into a period-appropriate camera, and shoot new footage that would, to a basic chemical test, appear decades old. The date on the film stock does not tell you when the images were captured, only when the blank canvas was manufactured. It is like finding a pristine sheet of paper from 1947. It proves the paper is old, but it says nothing about when the words were actually written upon it. This realization shifted the investigation from the film's chemistry to the objects within the frame. A closer look at the props and setting reveals a tapestry of subtle errors. The two protective suits worn by the examiners are a key example. They have the general silhouette of 1950s-era decontamination suits with their rounded hoods and bulky appearance. But the material lacks the rigid, almost crinkly texture of the rubberized canvas or plastic used at the time. Instead, it drapes and moves with a softer, more flexible quality, more reminiscent of modern synthetic materials. The viewing ports in the hoods are perfectly clear and round, unlike the often smaller, sometimes foggy or glass-blocked ports seen in genuine period equipment. Then there are the surgical instruments. While some look appropriately vintage, others appear oddly generic. Certain tools lack the specific design features of professional surgical implements from the 40s, looking instead like common laboratory spatulas or even modified kitchen utensils. The room itself is conspicuously bare. Beyond the central table and a few basic trays, there is almost no ancillary medical equipment, no monitoring devices, no stands for intravenous fluids, none of the supporting technology one would expect in any surgical setting, even a makeshift one. This sparse environment feels less like a secured government facility and more like a staged set, where only the essential props for the scene have been assembled. Perhaps the most famous anachronism is the clock on the wall. Visible in several frames, it is a simple, round-faced analog clock. To the casual viewer, it seems innocuous. But dedicated investigators and prop specialists noted that the specific font of the numbers, the style of the hands, and the overall design are more consistent with clocks manufactured in the 1960s or even 70s, not the 1940s. It is a small detail, but in a film claiming to be a pristine, unedited record from 1947, it is a glaring chronological intruder. Other subtle touches add to the sense of staged artifice. The black fluid that oozes from the body has a consistency that looks suspiciously like a simple mixture of water and food coloring, lacking the viscous, coagulating quality of real biological fluids. The lighting is flat and harsh, coming from a single direction as if from a movie light, rather than the bank of bright, shadow-eliminating surgical lamps a real procedure would require. Each of these elements alone could be dismissed as a coincidence or a result of poor film quality, but together they form a consistent pattern, a collection of stylistic choices and practical shortcuts that point not to a top-secret military archive, but to a cleverly constructed film set built with a mix of genuine old items and readily available modern substitutes. The film stock provided the vintage patina, but the props whispered a much more recent date of creation, pulling the entire spectacle back from the deserts of 1947 and into the workshop of a very creative artist. So if the film was a fake who had the skill to pull it off, the mid-1990s were a fascinating crossroads for visual trickery, a time when Hollywood magic was transitioning from the tangible to the digital. Big-budget films were beginning to experiment with computer-generated imagery, but the technology was still in its infancy, expensive and often unconvincing. For a project like the Alien Autopsy, the most believable path would have been the oldest one, practical effects. This was the domain of sculptors, mold makers, and puppeteers, artists who worked with foam latex, gelatin, and silicone to create creatures you could actually touch and film under real lights. To understand if the alien could have been built, we need to step into a special effects workshop of that era. Picture a studio not unlike a messy artist's garage, filled with the smell of curing rubber and clay. A team of just a few talented individuals could have undertaken this project. First, a sculptor would create the alien's form out of clay, capturing every detail of the oversized head, the sunken eyes, and those iconic six-fingered hands. From that clay sculpture, a plaster mold would be taken. Into this mold, they would pour layers of foam latex or a similar soft, flesh-like compound. Once cured and removed, you have a hollow, flexible skin. For the internal organs, the material of choice was often gelatin, the same substance used in fancy desserts. Gelatin is a special effects artist's best friend. It can be colored, molded, and made to jiggle with a disturbingly lifelike wobble. A lump of gray-tinted gelatin could easily become the brain, while other colored batches could be shaped into simple, abstract organs. The black fluid oozing from the body, that could be a mix of water, black food dye, and a thickening agent like methyl cellulose designed to flow slowly for the camera. The most complex part would have been the animatronics, if any were used. To make the creature seem like a once-living being, subtle details like a slightly sunken chest or a flexible limb would sell the illusion. In the mid-90s, basic radio-controlled mechanisms were well within the reach of skilled model makers. Small servo motors could be embedded in the foam body to allow an arm to be posed or a head to tilt slightly between shots. But watching the film closely, there is no clear moment where the alien moves on its own. every adjustment seems to be done by the examiner's hands. This suggests the prop might have been entirely static, a sophisticated but inanimate doll, which dramatically simplifies the fabrication. The budget question is crucial. Ray Santilli was not a Hollywood studio, he was an entrepreneur. Could he have funded this? The consensus among effects artists who have analyzed the footage is a resounding yes. For a small team working outside the studio system, creating a single, detailed prop and a simple set was not a multi-million-dollar endeavor. It was a freelance job, the kind of work done for low-budget horror films or television commercials. The set was just a room with a table, the costumes were modified hazmat suits, and the lighting was straightforward. The real cost was in the skill and time of the artists, not inexpensive technology. When you break it down, the Alien Autopsy does not require advanced CGI or million-dollar robotics. It requires craftsmanship, a good eye for anatomy, even a flawed one, and a deep understanding of how things look on grainy, black and white film, which hides a multitude of sins. The imperfections that biologists questioned, the strangely smooth skin, the hollow body cavity, the simplistic organs, are not evidence of alien life. They are the telltale signs of a clever, resourceful, and ultimately human creation. The film did not need to be perfect, it only needed to be convincing enough to survive that first shocking viewing, and in that, it succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams. For years, the identity of the artist remained one of the film's best-kept secrets. Then, in 2006, a man stepped forward and pulled back the curtain completely. His name was John Humphreys, a respected British sculptor and special effects artist whose work had appeared in major films and television shows. In a series of interviews and a stunning documentary recreation, Humphreys provided a confession so detailed it felt like a masterclass in illusion. He stated that Ray Santilli had commissioned him not to create one alien body, but two. His workshop became the birthplace of the most famous extraterrestrial in the world. Humphreys described the process with the casual precision of a craftsman. The bodies were sculpted from clay over a basic armature, capturing that iconic, large-headed silhouette. But it was the internal details that sold the gruesome reality. For the brain, he did not use complex gelatin molds. He used something far simpler and more visceral, actual sheep's brains purchased from a local butcher. These were placed inside the hollow skull cavity, providing the perfect convoluted texture when the top of the head was sawed off. For the other organs that tumbled out into the metal bowl, he again turned to the butcher's shop, using chicken entrails and other animal offal. The black fluid was, as many suspected, a mixture of food coloring and a simple thickening agent. To prove his story was not just talk, Humphreys participated in a documentary where he meticulously recreated the entire autopsy scene. He built a new alien prop, assembled a period-appropriate set with a metal table, and even donned a replica of the white protective suit. As the cameras rolled, he demonstrated every step from making the initial incision to carefully removing the sheep's brain, showing how the haunting images from 1995 could be produced in a small studio with modest materials and immense skill. His motivation for coming forward seemed to be a mix of professional pride and a desire to set the record straight after more than a decade of speculation. He was not a vengeful accomplice, but an artist finally claiming authorship of his most famous, if anonymous, work. The credibility of his account is overwhelming. Unlike Santilli's ever-shifting narrative about a mysterious cameraman, Humphreys' story was concrete, technical, and verifiable. He knew specifics about the materials that had never been publicly disclosed. He understood the lighting challenges and the camera angles. Most importantly, he could physically demonstrate the process from start to finish, producing a sequence that was indistinguishable in style and substance from the original film. John Humphreys did not just claim to have built the alien, he showed the world exactly how it was done, transforming the enigma from a cosmic mystery into a triumph of earthly craftsmanship. With the creator finally identified, only one question remained. Why did Santilli, the man who started it all, continue to hold onto fragments of his original story? John Humphreys' detailed confession placed a human creator squarely at the center of the mystery, but Ray Santilli's story was not finished evolving. Faced with this undeniable evidence from the artist himself, Santilli offered a new, carefully calibrated explanation. He admitted that the famous footage shown in 1995 was not, in fact, the pristine original film. He claimed the reels he purchased from the mysterious cameraman had been stored improperly for decades and had severely degraded, becoming a sticky, unprojectable mess. According to this revised narrative, he had hired Humphreys not to create a hoax from scratch, but to reconstruct the key scenes based on what he remembered seeing on those ruined films. In Santilli's telling, the 1995 video was a faithful recreation of genuine footage that was too damaged to show the world. This new story was a masterstroke of narrative preservation. It allowed Santilli to acknowledge the practical effects work while still clinging to the core legend of the original event. He was no longer just a film dealer, he was a historical preservationist, salvaging a vital truth from the ravages of time. But when you deconstruct this claim, it raises more questions than it answers. If the original film was a ruined, gelatinous blob, how could anyone accurately judge what was on it? Santilli said he and a small team viewed the degraded reels on a small editing machine, catching glimpses of images through the chemical decay. This is a profoundly subjective foundation. Memory is fragile and suggestible, especially when trying to interpret damaged, decades-old film of something utterly unprecedented. The idea that Humphreys could sculpt a perfect replica of an alien based on someone's memory of a corrupted image stretches credulity to its breaking point. The central, unanswerable question becomes how much of what we saw was recreation and how much was supposedly original. Santilli's story implies that the staging, the creature's appearance, and the autopsy procedure were all based on real footage. But if the original was gone, there is no benchmark for comparison, no way to verify that the recreation was accurate. This makes the entire project a closed loop. The only evidence for the original event is the recreation itself, and the only justification for the recreation is the claimed original event. It is a perfect logical circle, immune to external proof. Furthermore, if the most important forensic evidence, the original film, was lost to decay, then the entire case collapses back into pure assertion. We are asked to take Santilli's word for what he saw on those unviewable reels, the same man whose story about the cameraman had already fallen apart. This shifting narrative highlights the murky, adaptable foundation of the entire phenomenon. With each challenge from investigators, the story transformed to absorb the new evidence. First, there was a cameraman, then there was not. The film was original, then it was a recreation. The creature was real, then it was a model based on something real. Each adjustment served one primary purpose: to keep the core idea of a Roswell autopsy alive, even as the tangible evidence for it evaporated. It is the hallmark of a story that is not rooted in physical fact, but in a persistent desire for the tale to continue. The autopsy footage, therefore, exists in a strange limbo, a fabrication that points insistently to a truth it can never prove, built on a foundation that continually dissolves and reforms to meet the moment. This adaptability, not the grainy images themselves, may be the most telling feature of the entire enigma. Even the most convincing illusion needs a thread of truth to sell the fantasy. For believers in the autopsy film, that thread came from one of the most trusted names in photography, Kodak. In the midst of the swirling debate, a fragment of the original film was submitted for expert analysis. The hope was that the company's legendary archives could provide a definitive timestamp, a scientific anchor in the storm of speculation. A Kodak specialist carefully examined a single frame under magnification, searching for the tiny, coded markings that the company embossed along the edge of its film stock as a manufacturing fingerprint. What he found sent a jolt through the community. The edge marking corresponded to a specific type of Kodak film that was manufactured in only 3 possible years: 1927, 1947, or 1967. To many, this was the smoking gun they had been waiting for. 1947 was right there in the data, a perfect match for the Roswell incident. It seemed like cold, hard science had finally validated Ray Santilli's story. The film stock itself was from the correct era, proving it couldn't be a modern fake. This piece of evidence became a cornerstone for defenders of the footage, a technical detail too precise to ignore. But here is where we must separate the material from the moment it was used. The Kodak analysis was absolutely correct, but it answered only half of the question. The edge marking tells you when the blank celluloid was made, when it rolled off the factory floor and into a can. It does not and cannot tell you when that blank film was loaded into a camera and exposed to light. Think of it like finding a pristine, unused canvas from the 19th century. The age of the canvas is verifiable, but that tells you nothing about when the painter finally picked up a brush and created the image upon it. An old roll of film is a time capsule waiting to be opened, and it can be opened decades after its manufacture. A filmmaker in the 1990s with access to vintage film stock, whether purchased from an old warehouse or a collector's vault, could easily have loaded it into a period-appropriate camera. The resulting footage would carry the authentic edge markings of the past, creating a perfect forensic camouflage. This critical distinction transforms the Kodak lead from a definitive answer into a fascinating, but ultimately inconclusive clue. It proves the filmmakers had access to old materials, which we already knew was possible. It does not prove those materials were used in 1947. In fact, if someone were planning an elaborate period hoax, sourcing authentic vintage film stock would be one of the very first and most important steps. The Kodak data doesn't bridge the gap to Roswell. It merely confirms that the creators did their homework, adding another layer of skillful artifice to an already complex deception. So a promising lead dissolves upon closer inspection, not because the science was wrong, but because the question was more complicated than it first appeared. The film can be both genuinely old and completely fake at the same time, a paradox that lies at the very heart of this enduring mystery. The year 1995 was not a random date for this film to surface. It was a cultural lightning rod, a moment when public fascination with the unknown had reached a fever pitch. To understand why the Alien Autopsy landed with such explosive force, we have to step back into the atmosphere of that specific decade. The 1990s were in many ways the golden age of modern UFO mythology. On television, a show called The X-Files had become a massive hit. Its tagline, "The truth is out there," echoing in living rooms every week. Agents Mulder and Scully were not just fictional characters, they were archetypes for a national conversation, one that balanced desperate belief against skeptical science. The show made conspiracy theories feel thrilling, personal, and dangerously plausible. It primed an entire audience to look at grainy footage and government secrecy with a new, suspicious eye. Running parallel to this was the approaching 50th anniversary of the Roswell incident in 1997. The 2-year buildup was a media frenzy of its own. Books were published, documentaries were hyped, and news magazines ran speculative cover stories, all asking the same question: what really happened in the New Mexico desert in 1947? The public mind was already focused on Roswell, making it the perfect backdrop for a film that claimed to show the ultimate evidence. But the most crucial factor was the technological moment. This was a pre-internet world for most people. Information did not flow instantly. Fact-checking a claim like Santilli's required physical effort, writing letters, making long-distance phone calls, or scouring library archives. There was no way to instantly pull up military records, compare film stock databases, or crowdsource analysis on a global forum. This information vacuum was the hoax's greatest ally. In the absence of easy verification, the story could grow and mutate in the fertile ground of weekly tabloids and sensational television specials. News of the World and other publications ran screaming headlines, treating the film as a genuine mystery rather than a probable fraud. Television networks hungry for ratings presented it as an unsolved puzzle, giving equal weight to wild speculation and sober doubt. The film did not have to be perfect, it only had to be compelling enough to fill that hour of programming and spark the debate that would carry into the next week's papers. It was a perfect storm, a confluence of pop culture obsession, a looming historical anniversary, and a media landscape that thrived on mysteries it could not immediately solve. The Alien Autopsy was not just a film, it was a product perfectly engineered for its time, a mirror held up to a culture that desperately wanted to believe it was not alone in the universe and was willing to entertain even the shakiest evidence to prove it. The film invites us into a top-secret military autopsy, but the details of that setting quietly betray the story. A genuine operation of this unimaginable scale would be a fortress of secrecy, buzzing with controlled chaos. Yet the room we are shown is almost oppressively quiet and bare. Beyond the central table and a few basic trays, there is nothing. No banks of monitoring equipment tracking vital signs that never were. No stands for intravenous lines or blood transfusion bags. No shelves of chemical reagents for on-the-spot tissue analysis. There are not even any visible electrical outlets or light switches on the plain walls. This is not a sterile, state-of-the-art facility. It feels like a rented storage room hastily converted into a movie set, furnished with only the props required for the scene. The personnel mirror this puzzling minimalism. Only 2 individuals perform the entire procedure, their identities completely hidden behind dated protective suits. In a real-world scenario involving the most classified material in human history, you would expect a crowded room. A lead pathologist would be directing a team of specialists, each focused on a different system: the nervous system, the cardiovascular system, the exotic biology. High-ranking officers would be observing from behind a glass partition. Security personnel, armed and vigilant, would be stationed at the door. Instead, we have 2 anonymous figures who work in near silence, their movements lacking the crisp efficiency of trained military or medical professionals. Their demeanor is oddly casual at times, pausing to look at the camera or adjust their gloves with a slow, deliberate pace that suggests performance, not urgency. Where is the palpable tension, the hushed, intense conversation between experts trying to decipher an impossible biology? It is absent, replaced by a grim, theatrical silence. This absence extends to every marker of official procedure. Throughout the entire film, there is not a single piece of verifiable military identification. No unit patches on the suits, no name tags, no insignia of any kind. We see no paperwork, no clipboards with classification stamps, no evidence log being filled out. Most tellingly, there is no chain of custody. In any legitimate forensic operation, especially a military one, every sample, every instrument, every piece of evidence is meticulously logged, tracked, and sealed. A technician would be documenting the removal of each organ, labeling sample jars, signing and dating forms. Here, organs are unceremoniously dumped into a common metal bowl, with no attempt to catalog or preserve them individually. The film wants us to believe this is the ultimate secret, yet it shows none of the obsessive, bureaucratic control that always accompanies genuine state secrets. Compare this sparse staging to what we know of actual high-security government operations. Consider the infamous lockdown following President Kennedy's assassination, or the protocols around nuclear weapons handling. These events are characterized by overwhelming presence, multiple layers of security, and an exhaustive paper trail. The recovery of an alien spacecraft would dwarf all of those in classification level. The site would be swarming with personnel from multiple agencies, all operating under strict need-to-know orders. The autopsy would be recorded by multiple cameras from fixed angles, with every word spoken transcribed by a stenographer. The environment in Santilli's film possesses none of these hallmarks. Its emptiness does not feel like security. It feels like a creative limitation, a set built by a small team with a limited budget, not by a government with unlimited resources and an existential need to understand what it had found. The setting does not whisper of clandestine truth, it shouts of clever fabrication, a stage dressed to suggest secrecy while carefully avoiding the complicated, crowded reality that true secrecy demands. Perhaps the most unsettling theory is that the footage is not a hoax at all, but something else entirely, a truth hidden behind a more palatable lie. This alternative view suggests the body on the table is real, but it is not extraterrestrial. It is human, or at least it once was. Proponents of this dark idea propose the creature could be a tragically deformed human fetus, preserved for some macabre study. Its large head and spindly limbs could be explained by severe genetic conditions or horrific birth defects, magnified and distorted by the grainy film. Another, even more grim possibility points to the shadowy world of Cold War experimentation. The mid-20th century was a time of terrifyingly lax ethical boundaries in the pursuit of scientific and military advantage. Could this be a victim of early radiation experiments, exposed to lethal doses that caused grotesque physical mutations? Or perhaps it represents a failed attempt at pioneering surgery or biological weaponry, a human subject transformed beyond recognition. In this reading, the alien narrative is not a filmmaker's invention, but a deliberate, sanctioned cover story. By allowing a clearly flawed alien autopsy film to circulate, any future leak about real, unethical experiments on humans could be dismissed as just another part of the same silly UFO myth. The public, already conditioned by science fiction, would willingly accept an extraterrestrial explanation over a far more horrifying human one. It is a classic intelligence strategy, hiding a dark secret in plain sight by wrapping it in a more sensational but less believable story. The very flaws in the film, the odd anatomy and clumsy procedure, become part of the cover, making it look like an amateurish fake and thus deflecting serious inquiry. Conversely, there exists a mirror image of this theory, one that sees the film not as a cover for atrocity, but as a weapon of ridicule. In this scenario, the footage is a deliberate piece of disinformation, crafted by a government agency with intimate knowledge of the UFO community's desires. The goal was not to hide a truth, but to mock and discredit. By feeding believers an elaborate, yet ultimately absurd, piece of evidence, agencies could later expose it as a fraud, making the entire field of ufology look gullible and foolish. It would be a psychological operation, a way to drain energy and credibility from a movement that was asking too many uncomfortable questions about classified aircraft and secret tests. The film's enduring success would then be a colossal, unintended blunder, a joke that the audience stubbornly refused to get. Both of these theories, whether covering up a human tragedy or conducting a campaign of mockery, share a common thread. They posit that the real story behind the film is not about visitors from another star, but about the depths of human deception right here on Earth. They replace cosmic wonder with Cold War paranoia, suggesting the grainy images are a window into a different kind of darkness, one where the monsters are not from outer space, but are very much of our own making. Its legacy extends far beyond the grainy film itself, embedding deep into the fabric of our shared imagination. The Alien Autopsy footage did not just spark debate, it became a cultural touchstone, a shared reference point that everyone recognized. Its imagery was so potent it quickly leapt into the realm of parody, the ultimate sign something has truly arrived in the popular consciousness. In an episode of The Simpsons, Homer stumbles upon a similar film in the basement of the Springfield mystery spot. On South Park, the boys discover their own alien corpse in a government warehouse, leading to a famously irreverent take on the entire procedure. These satires were not dismissals, they were a form of absorption, proving the footage had become a universal shorthand for government cover-ups and cosmic weirdness. Its visual language directly influenced a wave of other alien-themed media, from the clinical horror of the autopsy scenes in The X-Files to the found footage style of later sci-fi thrillers. The film provided a template, a specific aesthetic of stock rooms, anonymous suits, and unsettling biology that creators could either emulate or react against. More importantly, it solidified a narrative. Before 1995, the Roswell story was largely about a crashed disk and maybe some debris. After the film, the public imagination firmly attached the image of a small, gray being on an autopsy table to that event. It provided a face, however bizarre, to the mystery. This transformation from disputed footage to entrenched myth is its most powerful effect. Even after the detailed confessions from the special effects artists, even after the logical and scientific debunkings, a persistent segment of the public holds onto a sliver of belief. Polls and continued discussions in online forums show that for many, the question is not settled. Some argue the confessions are themselves a cover-up, a way to finally bury the truth after it had already leaked. Others simply want to believe, finding the official explanations less satisfying than the grand, mysterious narrative. This enduring ambiguity is the film's true triumph. It ceased to be a piece of evidence to be verified and became a modern parable, a story we tell about secrecy, wonder, and our place in the cosmos. It asks a more profound question than whether aliens exist. It asks why we are so captivated by the idea of their discovery and what we are willing to accept in our search for answers. The footage is no longer just film, it is a mirror, and what we see in its grainy reflection says more about us than it could ever say about visitors from the stars. The final, definitive blow to the mystery arrived not in a scientific journal, but on a British television show in 2006. Emon Investigates Alien Autopsy, hosted by presenter Emon Holmes, was a landmark documentary that did what years of speculation could not. It provided a clear, demonstrable blueprint for the entire fabrication. This was not another talking head debate, it was a forensic reconstruction in reverse. The program's centerpiece was John Humphreys, the special effects artist, walking viewers through his workshop and openly confessing his role as the creature's creator. With calm, professional pride, he described sculpting the bodies from clay, casting them in foam latex, and sourcing the internal organs from a local butcher. He explained the simple concoction used for the black fluid and the practical challenges of filming under hot lights without melting the delicate props. Then he did the unthinkable. He recreated the autopsy live on camera, building a new alien model and donning a replica of the white protective suit. Humphreys meticulously reenacted the famous procedure, from the Y-shaped incision to the removal of the sheep's brain. Watching this recreation side by side with the original 1995 footage was a revelation. Every awkward movement of the examiners, every strange detail of the creature's anatomy, suddenly had a logical, earthly explanation. The documentary went further, systematically dismantling the film's supporting narrative. It highlighted the anachronistic clock on the wall. It dissected the implausibility of Santilli's story about degraded original film, pointing out that if the original was unsalvageable, there was no benchmark to prove the recreation was accurate, making the entire claim unfalsifiable. Investigators tracked down the original cameraman Santilli had named Jack Barnett and found no military record of his existence. They interviewed prop masters and film historians who identified the protective suits as clever imitations, not genuine 1940s gear. The cumulative effect was overwhelming. For the mainstream media and a large portion of the public, Emon Investigates served as a closing argument. It transformed the autopsy from an unsolved puzzle into a solved case of elaborate trickery. The shift in perception was significant. The dominant narrative in newspapers and documentaries moved from "is it real" to "how was it fake?" Yet, in a testament to the legend's stubborn power, the documentary did not deliver a final kill shot to the myth. For true believers, the confession itself became part of the conspiracy. They argued that Humphreys was a patsy, an artist hired to take the fall in a last-ditch government effort to bury the truth after it had already leaked. Others clung to Santilli's revised story, accepting the film was a reconstruction but insisting it was based on a real, unseen original. The documentary provided all the answers, but it could not control how those answers were received. It proved the film was a fabrication, yet it could not erase the profound desire that had made it a phenomenon in the first place. The mystery, in a way, simply evolved, retreating from the film itself to the motives of the people who made it, a smaller, darker puzzle rooted in human psychology rather than cosmic biology. Decades later, our tools for dissecting an image have evolved far beyond simple magnification. Modern digital forensics could subject the Alien Autopsy footage to a level of scrutiny its creators never anticipated. Imagine software capable of mapping the subtle texture of the creature's skin across every frame, searching for microscopic inconsistencies a human eye would miss. An AI trained on material science could analyze the way light reflects off the surface, comparing it to databases of foam latex, silicone, and human skin, potentially flagging areas where the material behaves more like a sculpted prop than living tissue. It could hunt for the telltale seams where a mold would join faint lines that might be invisible in the grainy original, but become apparent under algorithmic enhancement. Beyond the creature itself, the very fabric of the film could be decoded. Advanced software can analyze film grain patterns with incredible precision, potentially matching them not just to a decade, but to specific batches of Kodak stock or even camera models from the mid-20th century. It could search for compression artifacts or editing signatures that betray a more modern source tape, a digital intermediate step hidden beneath the vintage veneer. The black and white contrast could be stretched and probed, revealing details lost in the shadows, perhaps the edge of a studio light stand or a modern electrical cable taped to the floor. Yet for all this potential, a sobering question remains: could any analysis deliver a final, unassailable verdict? The footage is inherently low quality, a copy of a copy, plagued by the noise and decay of analog duplication. Each enhancement also amplifies artifacts, creating new digital ghosts that could be misinterpreted. Furthermore, the artists were not amateurs, they were masters of physical illusion who understood how their work would look on film. They likely took great care to avoid obvious seams, to blend textures, and to light the scene in a way that minimized flaws. The most sophisticated digital tool might simply confirm the craftsmanship, showing us not a glaring error but the absence of one, which proves nothing definitively. The greatest obstacle may be the film's own ambiguous nature. If we accept Santilli's final story that it is a reconstruction shot on old stock, then a perfect forensic analysis would only confirm that, yes, this is old film showing a modern model. It would not and cannot tell us what inspired that model. Technology can dissect what is on the screen, but it cannot reach through the screen to verify a memory or a lost original. The autopsy film, therefore, exists in a permanent state of technological limbo, forever promising answers with each new advance in analysis, yet forever retreating into the artistic and narrative ambiguities that gave it life in the first place. The film's power lay not in its evidence but in the minds of its audience. For those already convinced that the truth was out there, the grainy footage was a stunning piece of the puzzle finally clicking into place. This is a classic example of confirmation bias, our brain's tendency to eagerly accept information that fits what we already believe, while dismissing or ignoring details that do not. If you were certain the government had been hiding alien bodies since Roswell, then here, at last, was the missing visual proof. Every strange detail, from the odd anatomy to the secretive setting, became a point of validation rather than a red flag. The film fed a deep-seated hunger for wonder in a world that often feels explained and mundane. It offered a doorway out of the ordinary, a chance to believe that the universe held mysteries grander than our daily routines. Conversely, for skeptics, the same footage was a gallery of errors, a clumsy fabrication so obvious it was almost insulting. Their biases worked in the opposite direction, spotlighting every flaw, every anachronism, every biological impossibility. The autopsy became a perfect Rorschach test, a blank screen upon which we projected our own hopes, fears, and preconceptions about reality itself. Beyond bias, the film tapped into a profound and very human desire, the allure of the secret. Watching it made you feel like an insider, someone glimpsing forbidden knowledge hidden from the masses. It created a sense of privileged understanding, a feeling that you, the viewer, were now part of a select group who knew what really happened. This emotional pull is incredibly powerful, often overriding our logical faculties. At its core, however, the enduring appeal of the autopsy speaks to our deepest existential question: are we alone? The film offered a potential answer, and not just any answer, but a dramatic, visceral, and definitive one. It presented not just a distant light in the sky, but a body, a creature, something tangible that could be cut open and examined. It promised closure to a mystery that has haunted humanity for centuries. That promise, whether real or fabricated, proved irresistible. We did not just watch an alien autopsy. We watched a reflection of our own longing for connection in a vast and silent cosmos. The media did not just report the story, it became the story's engine. When Fox aired that first special in 1995, the presentation was masterfully crafted for maximum intrigue, not maximum truth. The program was framed as a puzzle box, a tantalizing what-if, deliberately avoiding the hard journalistic work of verification. They presented Ray Santilli's claims alongside skeptical commentary, creating a false balance that treated a probable hoax and legitimate scientific doubt as equally weighted possibilities. This was not investigative journalism, it was infotainment, a ratings gamble that paid off spectacularly. The ethical line between reporting a mystery and manufacturing one had been thoroughly blurred. By giving the film a prime-time platform without first establishing its provenance, the networks abdicated their core responsibility. They turned a question mark into a product and the audience's curiosity into a commodity. The frenzy was then amplified by the tabloid press. Publications like the Weekly World News and others ran screaming, definitive headlines declaring the film as real, presenting speculation as fact. They fed a feedback loop where the television specials generated buzz, and the tabloid headlines lent a veneer of widespread acceptance, which in turn drove more viewers to the next television special. This ecosystem was perfectly tailored for the pre-internet age. There was no instant fact-checking, no way for a viewer to quickly cross-reference Santilli's claims about military cameramen or film stock. The news cycle moved at the speed of print and weekly broadcasts, allowing the narrative to solidify in the public mind before any serious scrutiny could catch up. The media's role was not that of a gatekeeper, but of a megaphone. They took a strange film from a single source with a shaky story and broadcast it into millions of homes as the central piece of a global conversation. In doing so, they transformed a clever piece of special effects work into a modern myth, not by proving it was true, but by relentlessly asking the question, what if it was? The profit was in the perpetual mystery, not in its resolution. This raises an uncomfortable question: when the pursuit of a story becomes more valuable than the truth of that story, who is really being deceived? The Alien Autopsy was not an isolated phenomenon, but part of a long and colorful tradition of human deception. History is littered with hoaxes that, for a time, captured the world's imagination, each one a mirror reflecting our desires back at us. Consider the case of the Piltdown Man. In 1912, amateur archaeologist Charles Dawson announced a stunning discovery in a gravel pit in England. fragments of a skull that appeared to be the long-sought missing link between apes and humans. The scientific community, eager to find evidence of human evolution in Britain, largely embraced it. Experts endorsed the find, and it held a place in textbooks for over 40 years before modern testing revealed the truth. The skull was a clever forgery, a medieval human cranium combined with the jawbone of an orangutan, stained to look ancient. The parallels are striking: a charismatic promoter with a tantalizing story, a fragment of physical evidence that seemed to fit a pre-existing narrative, and a community of experts so hopeful for a particular truth that they overlooked glaring inconsistencies. Just as the Alien Autopsy fed a post-Cold War hunger for cosmic answers, Piltdown Man fed a nationalistic and scientific desire for a pivotal discovery on home soil. Then there are the Cottingley fairies, a charming deception from a more innocent age. In 1917, two young cousins in England, Elsie Wright and Frances Griffiths, produced a series of photographs showing themselves interacting with delicate, winged fairies in their garden. When the images came to the attention of the public, championed by none other than the creator of Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, they were taken as proof of the supernatural. The public, reeling from the horrors of the First World War, was desperately eager to believe in a magical, gentle world just beyond sight. The girls stuck to their story for decades, their simple paper cutouts held in place with hatpins fooling a world that wanted to be fooled. It was not until the 1980s that they finally confessed. Here again, we see the same ingredients: a compelling visual artifact, a promoter of stature giving it credibility, and an audience whose emotional need for the story outweighed their critical scrutiny. The fairies were not a malicious fraud, but a playful secret that grew beyond its creator's control, much like the alien body that began as a special effects project and became a global myth. These episodes, separated by decades and continents, speak to a universal human trait: our profound credulity in the face of a story that fulfills a deep need. We are not simply gullible, we are hopeful. The Piltdown forgery satisfied a yearning for scientific prestige. The fairy photographs offered escape and wonder. The Alien Autopsy provided a tangible answer to our oldest and grandest question. In each case, the hoax succeeded not because it was perfect, but because it was perfectly timed, arriving when the public psyche was most receptive to its particular fantasy. The initial expert endorsements, whether from paleontologists, a famous author, or television networks, provided the necessary social proof, giving permission for the wider public to believe. And the long period before a full confession, whether 40 years or 15, allowed the story to root itself deeply in culture, transforming from a current event into a piece of folklore. This is the enduring power of a well-told story. It can outlive its own debunking. The facts of the Cottingley fairies or the Piltdown Man are settled, yet their legends persist, captivating new generations. The Alien Autopsy has joined this peculiar pantheon, a confirmed fabrication that continues to inspire debate, documentaries, and wonder. It reminds us that sometimes the most compelling truth is not about what happened, but about why we so desperately wanted it to be real. Ray Santilli never left the world of the strange and unexplained that he helped create. In the years following the media frenzy, he embraced the notoriety, transforming from a mysterious film archivist into a permanent fixture of the alien mythos. His most surprising move came in 2006, the same year the definitive debunking documentary aired. He produced a feature film, a comedic retelling of the entire saga titled, aptly, Alien Autopsy. Starring popular British television duo Ant and Dec, the movie presented Santilli as a hapless but charming entrepreneur who stumbles into an interstellar scandal. It was a fascinating piece of self-mythologizing, a light-hearted farce that allowed the public to laugh with the story, and with Santilli himself rather than feeling deceived by it. By turning the hoax into a comedy, he effectively disarmed his critics and reframed the entire experience as a grand, whimsical adventure. This pivot was a masterstroke, ensuring his legacy would be tied to fun and mystery rather than to fraud or disgrace. Today, if you were to ask Ray Santilli directly if the film is real, you would likely receive a carefully crafted, enigmatic smile rather than a straight answer. He occupies a unique space in the cultural landscape, a man who speaks in riddles about his own creation. In interviews, he often defaults to his final, adaptable story, the one about the degraded original film and the faithful reconstruction. He neither shouts from the rooftops that it was all a pure fabrication from scratch, nor does he passionately insist on its absolute authenticity. Instead, he maintains a playful ambiguity, suggesting that perhaps the truth is more complex than a simple yes or no. He might wink and say the real story is even stranger than what we saw on television, or he might deflect with a question of his own, asking what the viewer truly wants to believe. This strategic vagueness is not an accident. It is the key to the legend's longevity and to Santilli's ongoing relevance. By refusing to give a definitive answer, Santilli keeps the conversation alive. A full confession would end the mystery, turning a dynamic myth into a settled historical footnote. A bold reaffirmation of its reality would invite renewed and likely devastating scientific scrutiny. But ambiguity is a fertile ground where speculation can forever bloom. It allows believers to cling to the idea of a hidden truth and skeptics to enjoy the cleverness of the con, all while Santilli remains the central, enigmatic figure at the heart of it all. This posture benefits him directly, keeping his name in documentaries, talk shows, and articles whenever the topic resurfaces, which it inevitably does. He becomes the go-to oracle for a mystery he himself engineered, a curator of his own cultural artifact. The autopsy footage is no longer just a film, it is a brand, and Santilli is its lifelong ambassador. His career, therefore, becomes a meta-commentary on the very nature of modern myths. They thrive not on proof, but on perpetual doubt, and on a storyteller who knows better than to ever truly finish the tale. But a confession, however detailed, does not automatically erase every shadow. For the most dedicated researchers who have pored over every frame, certain questions stubbornly refuse to fit neatly into the hoax narrative. The first is a matter of simple economics. Special effects, even in the early 1990s, were not free. John Humphreys was a professional, and his time and materials cost money. The set had to be built, the vintage film stock acquired, the camera crew paid. Ray Santilli was a music memorabilia dealer, not a film producer with deep pockets. Where did the initial investment, likely tens of thousands of dollars, come from? Santilli has never provided a clear financial paper trail, leading some to wonder if there were silent backers with their own motives, perhaps seeing the project as a lucrative gamble or something more. Then there is the puzzle of secrecy. Creating the footage required a team, a sculptor, mold makers, possibly assistants, and the film crew itself. In the age before the internet, keeping a secret was easier but not foolproof. How did Santilli ensure that not a single person involved, over what was likely weeks or months of work, leaked a word to the press or a friend? The promise of payment and confidentiality can be powerful, but the scale of the eventual media explosion would have been a huge temptation for anyone to claim credit early. The fact that the secret held until the planned television reveal is either a testament to remarkable operational security for a private project, or a hint at a more disciplined, organized effort than a simple freelance art project. Finally, there are subtle elements within the footage itself that some analysts feel Humphreys' explanation does not entirely resolve. The specific, jittery motion of the film, its particular pattern of grain and damage, has been argued by a few film restoration experts to be unusually consistent with genuine aging and duplication processes of the era, not just the result of copying a new film onto old stock. Others point to the behavior of the black fluid, noting its viscosity and the way it interacts with the table surface in a few shots, arguing it displays a complexity that goes beyond simple colored water. Are these observations the result of overanalysis, seeing patterns in the noise? Or do they indicate that the creation process was even more layered, perhaps involving the manipulation of genuine old footage as a base? The critical point is this: a perfect, watertight explanation for every single anomaly does not exist. The hoax narrative is the most logical and evidence-supported, but like any historical reconstruction, it has gaps. It is within these gaps, these unresolved details about money, secrecy, and physics, that speculation finds a permanent home. For believers, these are the cracks where the light of a deeper truth might still shine through. For everyone else, they are a reminder that even the most elaborate deception is a human creation, and humans are rarely perfect. It is the lingering imperfection of the story that ensures the debate never truly dies. The Alien Autopsy footage occupies a strange and lonely corner in the modern study of unidentified aerial phenomena. For serious researchers, the case is definitively closed. It is viewed not as a mystery, but as a masterclass in deception, a cultural artifact to be studied for its impact rather than its content. Within credible investigative circles, mentioning the film as potential evidence would be met with a polite but firm dismissal, a signal that one has not done the basic homework. The confessions, the forensic analysis, the anachronisms, they have all woven together into a consensus. The footage is a hoax. Its primary utility today is as a landmark case study in how not to conduct research. It stands as a warning about single-source claims, the dangers of emotional investment over evidence, and the profound influence of media amplification on public perception. Researchers point to it as the textbook example of why provenance, the clear and documented history of a piece of evidence, is paramount. If you cannot trace where something came from through verifiable channels, its value is essentially zero, no matter how compelling it looks. The autopsy film, with its phantom cameraman and its shifting origin story, fails this most fundamental test spectacularly. It serves as a permanent lesson in healthy skepticism, a reminder that extraordinary claims require not just extraordinary evidence, but transparent and bulletproof evidence. Yet, the recent seismic shift in official attitudes creates a complex new context for this old fraud. Government agencies now openly discuss UAPs, congressional hearings are held, and pilots report encounters with objects displaying impossible physics. In this new, more serious environment, does the ghost of the alien autopsy help or hurt? On one hand, it is a millstone around the neck of credibility. When a senator or a journalist new to the topic dips a toe into the water, they immediately encounter decades of pop culture baggage, with the autopsy film sitting prominently in the center of that messy landscape. It allows detractors to paint the entire field with the same brush of gullibility and spectacle, to dismiss modern, censor-based military reports by saying, "Is this not just like that silly alien autopsy video all over again?" The film provides a convenient shorthand for ridicule, a cultural touchstone that can be used to undermine serious inquiry before it even begins. It reinforces a damaging public perception that the search for non-human intelligence is the domain of the easily fooled, forever chasing grainy videos of obvious fakes. Conversely, one could argue the autopsy has inadvertently performed a brutal but necessary service. By being such a famous and thoroughly debunked fraud, it has forced a higher standard. Researchers today are hyper-aware of the need for data over drama, for radar telemetry over shaky home videos. The film's legacy is a kind of immune response within the community, a collective memory of embarrassment that pushes investigations toward scientific rigor and away from sensationalism. It has made both the public and officials more cautious, and in a field riddled with misinformation, that caution is a valuable, if painful, asset. The autopsy film is the embarrassing childhood photo of UAP research, a cringe-inducing reminder of a less sophisticated past. But just as we grow from our mistakes, the field has been forced to mature partly because of this very public and very elaborate stumble. It stands as a permanent monument to a critical idea that the desire for the answer must never outweigh the discipline required to find it. So the journey ends not with a definitive answer, but with a paradox. We have traveled from that shocking first broadcast, a global sensation that divided the world, to a detailed confession that exposed it as an elaborate fabrication. The evidence is overwhelming, a creation masterminded by Ray Santilli and built by the skilled hands of John Humphreys, yet the story refuses to lie flat. The shifting narratives, the strange allure of the secret, and that deep human ache to believe in something more, they all conspire to keep the enigma alive. A few stubborn details still whisper from the edges about money and secrecy and the odd behavior of fluids, ensuring the case file is never fully closed. In the end, the alien autopsy footage may not be proof of extraterrestrials, but it is definitive proof of something equally powerful, our endless fascination with the unknown. It is a mirror held up to our own hopes, our skepticism, and our timeless need for wonder. What do you think? Did you see the film when it first aired? Do you have your own theory about what really happened behind the scenes? Share your memories and thoughts in the comments below.